I made a video last night about Maxine Waters, and well, it was basically looking at the media response as well to Maxine Waters, namely in this case CNN, and here we are with Fox, who've taken an even more hard line against her. Now, the video that I showed in my previous video, it was of CNN, a group of CNN commentators, newscasters or whatever they're called, news presenters, and they were all condemning Maxine Waters for apparently abusing her position, her social position, to incite the mob, as it were, this appealing to a mob mentality among the people. And it was in relation to Sarah Huckabee Sanders being refused service in a restaurant, which has also happened to another Trump supporter recently. I've forgotten her name. And there's been a big hoo-ha about it on both sides of the fence, as it were. And ultimately, in my video, I explained that no, people do have a right to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't want you in my restaurant, because they feel so disgusted by those people's inhumanity. I mean, we are talking about people who side openly with Zionists, okay? And I say that without referring to Jewish people. I do not connect Jewish people with Zionism. The fact that this cult that calls itself Zionism has attached itself to the plight of Jewish people in order to feed off their suffering and gain power for itself, has got absolutely nothing really to do with the Jewish people themselves as a force of consciousness on our planet. And, you know, we cannot forget that Judaism is the foundation of both Christianity and Islam. That's a fact, okay? We can't cut Islam out of the picture. Even Islam does include Jesus as a true prophet of Allah, which is their name for God. Jews, Yahweh, you know. But really, you know, by any other name, a rose would smell as sweet. So, you know, what's in a name, really? But anyway, getting back to the issue here with Maxine Waters, she expressed support for those people, and she said, yes, stand against them in that sense. Refuse to serve them. You know, get a crowd around you and say, no, we're not serving you. No, speak out, people, because that is the only power that people have here. That is the only power, okay? And we're talking about a people, the impoverished mass of America, let's face it, the overwhelming majority of Americans are one paycheck away from eviction from their homes. That is how it is. That's the reality that most people are living under. The majority of people haven't got a big fat cushion to fall back on. Even now, they're relying very heavily on family support, the support of friends and family, to get through intermittent hard times, say in between jobs. People are losing their jobs through no fault of their own. And we know that these corporations have actively worked to destroy American industry through, you know, buying up every available business. They have treated our planet like a giant sort of the Monopoly game, haven't they? You know, like, oh, we'll buy this here in that country, we'll buy this business, we'll run this business down so we can improve profits for this other business that we own. And, you know, that is the way that it goes. Oh, we'll transport all this industry from America to China, where we can exploit the Chinese people. And I was watching what's his name, Pac-Man, recently, and he made a point that I have made previously in my videos, that all this rhetoric against immigrants. You know, immigrants are stealing our jobs, immigrants are stealing our houses, our healthcare, they're creating crime and blah blah blah. This whole rhetoric from men like Trump is absolutely disgusting, considering that Trump himself and all of his ilk have profited very nicely from exploiting the huge mass of immigrants that they so vociferously complain about, and yet who have contributed to their profits because they would rather employ cheap labour than give American citizens a living wage. There would be no place for these illegal immigrants if employers were not prepared to exploit them. That's the fact of it. That's the fact of it. That's the guarantee. They're not flocking to America to get welfare checks. An illegal immigrant can't get welfare checks, can they? They're not flocking to America to profit from Medicare. They're flocking to America because they know that the employers of America will gladly sacrifice American people in order to make a profit for themselves out from exploiting the vulnerable, impoverished people fleeing to America from the extreme oppression and violence that America itself has funded and helped to create in their own respective nations. And a lot of that is absolutely pivots on the ridiculous prohibition, okay? Prohibition right from the start against alcohol was shown to cause immense problems and crime and inflict absolute damage and disunity on every single American community that was part of that. It unleashed a force of horror in America. Prohibition against alcohol. Therefore, you know, to actually, okay, we'll end prohibition against alcohol and we'll put it on all these other, even more addictive substances, and even actually harmless non-addictive substances like marijuana, which now we know they included marijuana specifically because they were afraid of the properties of hemp that would decimate their plastics industry that they were just investing in, because they needed to actually produce something with the massive waste from the oil industry, which was a huge headache because it's extremely toxic and it does need to be safely stored, you know. I mean, previously they were just dumping it here and there, and then, you know, stricter regulations were brought in to stop that kind of thing because it does poison the landscape. It is, you know, a serious environmental toxin, oil waste. So obviously they were anxious to do that, and then you have the main media mogul who owned virtually all of America's newspapers, William Randolph Hearst, who, you know, he was like the Fox News of the day, with CNN rolled in. You know, he was the main media, and he'd invested in forests, woodlands in Mexico in order to feed his wood pulp paper mills, you see. So he'd borrowed a lot of money, he was in debt to the banks, he'd upgraded, he'd built these huge wood pulp paper mills to produce, you know, the actual paper material that he prints his magazines on and his newspapers. I mean, he literally was the Rupert Murdoch of his day. And then to suddenly, you know, American state-sponsored scientists found out that you could make much better quality paper from hemp that doesn't rot as easily and doesn't need anything like as much bleaching. From hemp, you know, you could make paper and you could make 4 times as much of it. And this hemp, you know, it only takes like 3 or 4 months to grow. As big as a tree nearly. So, whereas, you know, how long does it take for a tree to grow that you'd then chop down to make your paper out of? So basically Hearst had invested in the wrong kind of technology, hadn't it? His technology for his wood pulp paper mill was already defunct. the moment that it became possible to produce hemp paper much cheaper and actually eco-friendlier, a lot more eco-friendlier. And it was even found that you could produce biodegradable plastics from hemp as well. So therefore the DuPonts, who just invested huge sums into making all kinds of things out of their oil waste, namely plastics, they couldn't cope even with any slight impact on their foreseen profits, you see. So, you know, we understand the psychology at work behind the prohibition and how prohibition was used also to deny hemp, because, you know, by including marijuana as a drug to be prohibited, then that meant that a heavy tax could be imposed on hemp farmers because they could be growing the sativa varieties of hemp, you know, the mind-altering varieties of hemp. And because industrial hemp and the sativa varieties of hemp rich in THC are virtually identical, it would be virtually impossible for police, you know, to actually discover, well, which plant is THC rich. You know, it would be easy. So that was their argument, you see. That was their argument, that under cover of growing hemp, these hemp farmers could secretly be growing an illegal product and profiting from tax-free sales of that product under cover of growing hemp, and therefore in order to inhibit that activity, then we need to put a huge tax on hemp, you see. And that was it. Hemp was gone out of the market. And bearing in mind that hemp once backed the dollar, and it was a very successful dollar it backed too, because hemp is an abundant and immensely useful product. And that one act that basically prohibited hemp by literally taxing it out of the market on the strength of the fact that it's identical to the THC rich prohibited varieties of the hemp family, you know, that immediately cut out, it literally robbed food off the plates of the American people, because the American people could have been growing hemp and profiting from that for themselves, and actually, you know, not having to be dependent on welfare. And the fact that so many people end up dependent on welfare, and it is disproportionately, there's a you know, and it is a terrible proportion of black American people who are suffering the worst levels of poverty. That's a fact, you know, and that doesn't detract from, you know, the severity of white people suffering the same levels of poverty. Poverty is poverty, but it does also, that discrepancy does reflect the fact that after centuries and centuries and centuries of oppression, that black people have suffered in America, that still, to this very day, they are paying the price of the disgusting, terrible judgments that were issued against their humanity just on the colour of their skin. And it has been difficult for myself, who grew up in a multicultural community, who has a multicultural family, to have witnessed this from childhood. And that when I realised what was going on in America, it was and the murder of Martin Luther King, such a lovely, beautiful man who, in spite of everything that his kin had suffered, what was he preaching except love and forgiveness and decency and respect, you know, and non-violence, but yes, protest. And that is exactly what Maxine Waters said to the people around her. She wasn't preaching hate, she wasn't preaching violence, she was following exactly in Martin Luther's footsteps of yes, you know, social expression, protest. Because what else can people do, you know? She's not telling people to beat these people up. She's not telling them to punch them. She's just telling them that, no, stand up for your humanity in the face of these wolves. Because that's what they are, make no bones about it. They follow the wolf dictates, the wolf law. Might equals right to do as thy will. Okay, that's the wolf pack law. They do follow the dictates of ancient Rome that did follow a wolf pack. That was their social structure, a wolf pack. Don't forget, Rome was established by two brothers, Romulus and Remus, who were raised by wolves, and it's their consciousness that established Rome. And even they lived that out to the extent that one of those brothers killed the other in order to have full control, because that's the mentality of the wolf pack. One is always vying for greater power, and the females and pups, well, they just come absolute last. They are the last, you know, and that is what we're up against. Make no bones about it. And they will put on the fluffy sheepskin, and they will find every way to appeal, and they will actually themselves feed on emotions, on negative emotions, on negative judgments, unfounded judgments really. And the Trump campaign undoubtedly has fed on the tradition of racism that is still an inherent feature within American society. That people are looking at each other and judging each other according to the colour of their skin and their ethnic background or their faith. You know, Muslims are suddenly a huge enemy. Instead of understanding that a wealth of people means a wealth of hands to make light work. And, you know, again, I will repeat, the $21 trillion that's been stolen by the Pentagon. Imagine how, you know, there couldn't be enough Mexicans coming into America to help rebuild that country. If America abandoned its policies of controlling and crushing any movements within South America for a fairer society, that people could pay decent wages, you know, then there wouldn't be so many immigrants. They're feeding off it. They're feeding directly off it, and actually now have even empowered themselves on the strength of the horror and mess that they've created. As oh, we're going to stop these immigrants, but you know, we'll grab the children off them first. It is outrageous. It is despicable. Okay, it's totally outrageous. And yet, you know, she, Maxine Waters, God bless her, was called outrageous. Apparently she's outrageous because she has said to people, yes, if they turn up in your restaurants, if they turn up in your shops, her ancestors, that is what they were told, from the colour of their skin. Just from the colour of their skin, get out of my shop, get off that seat off the bus. No, you are not allowed in this school. No, you're not allowed to walk on this side of the street. They have had to live with that for how long? And for all her life, like I said in my previous video, and suffering, she's reached this level only to witness that same consciousness now get its feet firmly under the White House tables. Well, them tables, they are going to turn, and they are ready for turning, because this psychopathic madness of discompassionate rhetoric needs to end, because the humanity is a species of passion, and our emotion is a strength. That yes, we can feel an emotion, we can feel it, and we can stand up for that emotion in face of the psychopaths. And no, we don't lose our heads and start beating people up, but we will say to them, I'm sorry, we will not eat with you. Because that's a very important thing, who we eat with. No, I will not serve you petrol. And they deserve it. They deserve it. They need it. They need it. They need to be shown that, no, what you're talking about, what you're supporting is an offence, and it is a danger. It puts children at risk. Okay? So yes, Maxine Waters is exactly right. She's not inciting violence. She's inciting humanity. That is what she's doing. Now, if you want to talk about inciting violence, okay, then just have a listen to this.
This guy started screaming by himself, and they did, I don't know, rough up. Maybe he should have been roughed up, because it was absolutely disgusting what he was doing. So if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees. I promise. I promise. We're not allowed to punch back anymore. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you. We having a good time? USA! USA! All right, yeah, get him out. Try not to hurt him. If you do, I'll defend you in court. Don't worry about it. In the good old days, this doesn't happen because they used to treat them very, very rough. And when they protested once, you know, they would not do it again so easily. Isn't it great to be at a Trump rally, really? Right? Part of the problem, and part of the reason it takes so long, is nobody wants to hurt each other anymore, right? I will call up Carrier, the president, because I have to do it myself. I know it's not.
So, you know, I noticed that the video has actually been taken away, so you couldn't actually see the video footage. Only the sound now stays. But, you know, if that's not inciting violence, I don't know what is. And that's just against people. That's against people who are protesting against the kind of rhetoric that he's been using, the absolute. It's total racism. But what do you expect from a Zionist? Because, like I say, I don't include Jews in Zionism. There's Christian Zionists, there's Muslim Zionists, there's atheist Zionists. It is a consciousness. It's a consciousness that believes that certain people are superior to other people by way of their race or, you know, class background. Apparently, people who are poor, well, God meant them to be poor. According to these people, everything that happens is God's will. God put Trump into power. No, he didn't. Voting machines and denying the votes to over 1 million American citizens, that is what put Trump into power. And when you're dealing with that level of corruption that America's facing today, where, you know, go and have a look again at 9/11 and ask yourself, is that credible that the laws of physics take a day off in New York? Is that credible? Because that is what is being put to the American people as what happened, that the laws of physics took a day off. That's the basic gist of the 9/11 findings, isn't it? That is the basic gist. They lied to the people to convince people that the laws of physics can take a day off. Well, I tell you, sanity has took decades off in America. Sense and sanity that include compassion. You know, this universal intelligence that wrote our DNA and gave us universal law because it included love in the writing of our DNA. Love, it is a true universal gift of our consciousness and being. And these people, the Trump people, think that they can just cut out compassion. Their love is only for money. Their love isn't for being right. And intelligence needs always to be right. Otherwise, we're in danger. That's the whole point of having an intelligence. So we can work out which is the right way to go. Well, this world should know by now that the right way to go is with our true humanity, our true compassion. And what strength has this woman? And how much compassion must be in her heart. How much love and dedication that in spite of the oppressions of the history that has oppressed herself and her ancestors, that nonetheless she has followed that American dream to its fullest, truest sense, as Martin Luther King. He explained the American dream. I have a dream, and his dream is the American Constitution, isn't it? For a unified society that has a moral and ethical backbone, that is universally Christian in the truest sense of Christianity, that does not stand by Zionism. And anybody who stands by Zionism, they are directly supporting the murdering and theft of that the Palestinian people are suffering now. They are directly supporting concentration camps for children, for families in Palestine. That is what the people of Palestine are living in. They're living off aid. They've been robbed of everything. Israel totally controls their lands. Israel totally controls who can go in or come out of Palestine. You know, the world we just cannot consciously continue to accept this horror. Because what the people of Palestine are suffering now is no different to what the black American descendants of the black slaves. And it's about time that they had their freedom to be human beings, their true humanity, as full human American citizens. And yes, it will take our emotion, it will take our righteousness and our compassion. That's the only thing that can defeat these psychopaths. She's not promoting hate, she's not promoting violence. Not in any way at all. That is a total exaggeration. She supported the actions of that restaurant owner and its staff. And she said to people, yes, you stand up and do the same. Show them that we do not tolerate it. We have a right to express some emotion and passion. Human rights, freedom of speech and expression. And we have a right. We have a right to refuse criminals onto our premises. And just as once the black African slave descendants of America were considered a criminal by nature just by the colour of their skin, well, these people now actually are criminals. They're promoting hate and violence. That's what they feed off. They're supporting people who steal lands off the Palestinian people and bomb their children, who call their children little snakes, and openly incite even the murder of the mothers to stop them breeding, quote, to stop them breeding more little snakes. That's from Zionist Israeli government minister, okay? That is, make no mistake who Trump and the supporters are standing by. That is the consciousness. It is serious. She's right to say, yes, you tell them, get out, you criminals, you murderers, you thieves, get out of our shop, get out of our restaurant. You've stolen the bread out of the children's mouths of America. You've robbed this nation of $21 trillion that's gone where? To Israel? To your corporate militaries? Is that how you funded these corporate militaries that you've produced? No, no, no. I tell you, human emotion, you're way too low. You've been way too oppressed. You bring your emotions up, and that's what they're scared of. But unlike the Trump supporters whose emotions run high on racist rhetoric and the giddiness of hate that is suddenly liberated in them, no. We have a head, and our head ultimately rules our emotions. We know they want riots. But righteously standing up to say no. Sorry, we are not serving criminals. Because this is a criminal consciousness that is governing our planet right now. And that's the fact of it, and that is why they're all too big to prosecute. So, you know, full support to Maxine Waters and all this stuff, you know, that is now being said against her now by Trump. How disgusting, what a despicable man Trump truly is, that he has the audacity to, you know, call Maxine Waters out saying that she's inciting violence against Trump supporters, when you've just heard his rhetoric, even offering to defend people who commit crimes against anyone who protests. When we have a right to protest against racism. People have a right to protest against racism. But, you know, according to him, punch them in the face. In fact, you know, let them be taken out on a stretcher. And that man still got voted into power. Yeah. All of it very, very, very suspect. Very suspect. And, you know, what else would we expect from Fox News? You know, it is about inciting mob violence. Mob violence. Look at 9/11. Look at the dead President JFK and his brother Bobby Kennedy. Look at the dead Martin Luther King. You want to think mob violence? Yes. You're the mob, aren't you, Mr. Trump? And your administration. That is exactly what you are. A Zionist mob that feeds off every kind of human suffering. And even established Israel in the name of Jews on the strength of it as well. And even profited from it. From that suffering. Even profited. We know the Bush's involvement with Hitler and the blooming evil camps. And regardless of what anybody says about how many Jews Hitler killed, it makes no difference, right? Whether or not 6 million were killed or whether 600,000. It doesn't make any difference. The fact is that Jewish people were persecuted and used as slaves and did suffer inhumane treatment and torture at that, and were experimented on by the German Nazis. That's a fact. Just because 6 million weren't killed, it does not exonerate Hitler. And we know that he was directly funded by the Rothschilds anyway, who were using them to ethnically cleanse their own race, apparently. According to the evidence, that's my suspicion. Okay, so let's get real. Let's get really, really real, people, and face reality. Face what is staring us in the face. And it is time to remove these wolves from the fold, because they are causing a lot of damage, and to rescue as many people as we can that are trapped in that consciousness right now, to show them that, look, there is another way. Yes, we will tell you to get out of our restaurant, but if at any time you say, I'm out with all that hate and racism, welcome back home. You know? Because we're human beings. We forgive. We can forgive. Trump, does he forgive? No, he does not. So, you know, again, big, huge thanks to Maxine Waters, and God bless her and everybody who stand with compassion and sense and sanity in this world, because seriously, our children need a future, and this mob presently governing most countries of this world isn't offering them a future at all. Okay, their future is debt slavery, and we need to say no to it now. So thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm sorry, you know, if people think, I know people think I'm over passionate sometimes. Well, you know, I am a survivor of the worst kind of abuse in this world, some of the worst kinds of abuse, and I have no choice really except to feel as I feel on behalf of the good people of Earth, and I strongly feel that it is time, you know, that people do take lead from genuine, caring, compassionate people who righteously stand up and speak out in the face of absolute tyranny and criminals. So, you know, love and God bless to all.